Hi, my name's Janet Hall. I'm chair of the Jersey Football Association's Inclusion Advisory Group. And today we're here with this video podcast to talk about the Rainbow Laces campaign, which is about raising awareness of LGBTQ plus inclusion in football and in sport. And this is in support of our Football for All strategy, which was recently released as part of the wider Jersey Football Association strategy. I'd just like to introduce my two colleagues with me today who've kindly agreed to take part in this video podcast. We'll start with you, Tiff, please.
So I'm Tiff and I play for Roselle Rovers and I also play for Jersey.
Brilliant, thank you.
I'm Jay, I also play for Roselle Rovers.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So I thought it'd be useful just to talk about, first of all, why you play football, how you got involved and what it means to you. Maybe we start with you, Jay.
Yeah, sure. I've always played football really since I was sort of 4 or 5 playing with the minis back in St Clement's when I used to play there. I love it. I just love the sort of camaraderie around it, the banter, sort of physical exercise. It's a chance for me to just release and not think about anything else other than chasing a ball around and not playing particularly well, but just enjoying myself with my teammates.
Fantastic. And you, Tiff?
Yeah, mine's pretty similar. So started playing whilst I was in school, really enjoyed it, and then sort of kept playing with like the Player Development Centre and just enjoyed being with my friends eventually when I joined the Women's League. Just lots of different types of people there once you leave school, and so it was just enjoyable to play with your friends. It's really, really fun.
Fantastic. Well, the Rainbow Laces campaign this year is about speaking up and having the conversation about LGBTQ+. And it would be great if we could just have a chat about that in a bit more detail. And I appreciate this could be obviously quite personal for you, but it'd be really useful to understand whether either of you have either experienced or witnessed any type of prejudice or discriminatory type of behaviour or language whilst you've been playing or taking part in football. I don't know if either of you want to start.
Yeah, I'll start. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, unfortunately, there have been a few instances over the years of sort of me being on the receiving end of sort of some homophobic abuse or type words, that shouldn't really be used. What I would say is that's becoming increasingly less frequent, which is good. I think back in the day, years ago, there's probably some language that was thrown around much more commonly, whereas now I think it's much more known that it's not accepted in the modern sort of world. And I think when it is said, a lot more people call it out and it gets dealt with in sort of the appropriate fashion. I know the guys here at the JFA take those kind of things really seriously. So whilst there have undoubtedly been a few sort of unsavoury moments, in the large, I think my experience has been really positive. But I just think it's really hurtful when you do sort of hear those things for various reasons. But yeah, as I said, it's becoming less common, I hope, anyway.
That's great. Thank you, Jay. Tiff?
So not really experienced anything whilst playing football as an adult, but it was more sort of the association of being gay and playing football. So it's just assumed that the stereotype that female footballers are all lesbians. And so when I was at school, because I played football, everyone assumed I was before I actually even knew, which was sometimes difficult. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the environment that we have now is so inclusive for female football that it's never been a problem since I've actually started playing. It's more people's opinions outside of female football.
Absolutely, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think actually it applies to quite a few women's sports in particular. Yeah. There's an assumption about your sexuality. So thank you for that. On that note then, what can we do at all levels, so from minis, as you said you started, all the way up to, say, adults, referees and coaches, to make football a more LGBTQ plus inclusive sport?
I think choice of language, as I said before, is so important. There's just certain words that shouldn't be used nowadays, and if you hear them, you should call it out. Either speak to that person or report it in the appropriate manner. It might be, and I think a lot of the time people use words or sort of homophobic slurs, and they don't necessarily mean to be homophobic. They might not even know what the word means. But I think it's about sort of educating those people that language isn't acceptable. And then if they're still not receptive to your advice, then reporting it through the appropriate channels. But I think it's all about education in the main. I think most people don't mean to be homophobic. So I think it's all about education really, and calling things out where they need to be called out.
Fabulous, thank you, Tiff.
Yeah, I would say that representation across all people involved in football is so important. It's like having the coaches, referees being like as open as they can, and young children seeing LGBTQ plus, like adults or people that are in the game and involved in it and aren't sort of shy to hide that away. So like for me personally, when I was growing up in Jersey, there wasn't anyone I knew of, and I had several coaches and other people involved in football that was openly gay. Whereas now I'm quite open about it, and I'm lucky enough to coach with my girlfriend, play with my girlfriend. And when I'm coaching, and for example, there was one girl, when I was missing for one weekend, she asked where I'd been, and I just said, I was visiting my girlfriend. And it's just sort of not being scared to say, it is personal, but if I had a boyfriend, maybe I wouldn't be second guessing myself, because that's just sort of the assumed normal. But I'm glad that I was able to be open about it, because when I was younger, there wasn't that representation. And as well with loads of the female, in the female game, there's a lot more than in the male game that are openly out, and they're like on social media, making posts that are quite public. And I think seeing that representation is so important to make those children that are maybe struggling with their sexuality, or younger people struggling, or an adult struggling, actually make it seem like, actually, this is a space where I can be who I want to be. And I think that's so important, which is why I encourage as many people as possible to just try and be themselves. But obviously it's a personal choice whether to be openly out or not.
I think that's such a good point that Tiff has just raised, because from my own personal perspective, when I was younger, as a gay man, there was no one, when I was sort of playing football, there was no sort of role models that I could look up to, or even people sort of locally who I knew that were gay men playing football. I thought the two things were sort of incompatible, between I either had to play football and hide who I was, or I could come out, but then I couldn't play football. I thought there was no opportunity for me to do both, which was completely illogical, but at the time that's just sort of how I was thinking. So I think representation, and the sort of the times we're in now, where it's much more, people are much more open, and you see the support on social media and stuff like that, it's such a good point that Tiff has raised. Representation really does matter, and I think that's why the Rainbow Laces campaign is so important, because it's much more than just wearing rainbow laces, even though they look great.
Yeah.
But it shows that you're supportive of sort of LGBTQ plus people. So yeah, I think that's a really good point that Tiff raised.
I think it's important as well to just note that some people sort of assume, there's just more of us now, but that's not actually the case. It's that representation. Like, I'm thinking of the girls that I've coached, and actually now they're becoming more comfortable with themselves earlier on. And it's not that there's more of them, it's the representation. I feel sometimes that can be an assumption that's made by people that's not completely accurate.
So Tiff, we were talking about being a female in sport, the assumptions that are made about our sexuality and how it is different to men playing football. I'd be intrigued just to explore it a little further and get some of your views on that, please.
Yeah, so I was just chatting about this the other day with my girlfriend, and we were saying how interesting it would be that our experiences, like sort of representative of, gay and lesbian, would be so different within football, and it was sort of like the reverse happens. So we were talking and saying how when female footballers or female sportswomen grow up, they're assumed to be more masculine and therefore assumed to be gay. And so it's difficult, I think, to get that participation in football for those girls who actually maybe they want to play netball instead because that's more feminine and seen as more heterosexual. So I think that we struggle getting the female participation partly due to that. And as part of my dissertation as well, I interviewed loads of youth players and looked at the barriers to football, and actually a reoccurring theme was the stereotypes of sexuality being put onto those female footballers. Whereas once I and many others who I've spoken to came into that adult environment, free from, you know, school and things, it was a much more freeing experience, actually just being able to be who you are, because all of a sudden it was like, well, actually, yeah, I do play football, and actually, yeah, this is who I am. And it was welcoming and inclusive. Whereas when I think of probably your experiences and other people like you, it's probably the opposite. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a really interesting point because, as you say, it was the opposite for me when I was sort of growing up, and before I came out, it was always assumed that I was straight, not that I was gay, and that was because I played football. Because, you know, there was no one else that I knew that was gay and playing football, so everyone would assume that I was straight, which was a sort of a barrier to me.
Yeah, they're barriers in their own way, aren't they? Yeah.
But as you say, once I did come out, and after sort of a short period of time, I became used and happy and open with who I am, I don't even think about it anymore. I play football, and it's not even a thought for me, it's not a thought for my teammates. But it's just an interesting perspective, because I hadn't really thought about it from a sort of woman's point of view, where everyone had assumed you were straight before you even knew what you were, when it was the opposite for me.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with what you were saying. It's a really interesting point with regards to sort of the barriers and how it differs between sort of the male and female game. It's a really interesting point.
So the education representation are key points when it comes to being inclusive, LGBTQ plus inclusive. And I think role modelling is also something you've mentioned, and allyship. So people who may not be identified as LGBTQ plus being supportive of those who are. I think that's really important as well, is understanding if you aren't sure yet about your sexuality, or you're thinking about coming out. Have you got any advice for people who want to learn more about LGBTQ plus, or maybe are thinking about, you know, coming out? Is there anything you would help, or you think you could help them with?
I would say if someone's thinking about coming out, definitely talk to a close friend or family member first, maybe before sort of taking that big step and coming out to everyone, just to even bounce your feelings off them, you know, talk them through how you're feeling, what you're thinking about doing, you know, you want to come out, you don't want to come out. I think there's also various sort of online resources nowadays. I think Stonewall is a pretty good resource where people can go online to find sort of support or media articles, you know, to provide support to people who are in those circumstances.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think just someone that you trust a lot, that, you know, you'd be comfortable maybe with, you might know a bit about them already and how you could predict how they're going to react. I think it's more difficult coming out to someone when you don't know how they're going to react. That can be the scariest part, I think. But it's coming out to someone who maybe you've talked about things openly and they seem like an understanding sort of person. So yeah, opening up to someone that you trust, I think, is important, and also to do it in your own time. I mean, there's such a pressure, I think, to just be out, but actually it can happen when you're 12, it can happen when you're 21, it could happen when you're 60, and I think people are quite quick to judge when the right time is to come out. I know there are people that in relationships that still don't want to come out, and that's okay as well, but it's just doing it in your own time when you feel comfortable. And I think the more conversations that we have like this, the more representation there is, it will help those people.
And do you think as well it's about sort of respectfully asking? Because I think sometimes people are too scared, aren't they, to ask if they don't understand themselves. So I think it's probably important that people respectfully ask people how they want to be referred to, especially when it comes to you know, gender pronouns, for example. Has there been sort of anything that you have seen or experienced maybe in the UK or even here in Jersey, which you think has been really helpful to, you know, promote LGBTQ plus inclusion?
I would just say for me it's the like professional female footballers being so public. And I know there was this photo of Magdalena Eriksson and Pernilla Harder sharing a kiss after one of them had won a game, and that went like viral, and it was just amazing to see actually how many people were supportive of that. And if you read the comments, you know, of that photo, you know, sometimes they would, like, you'd expect negative ones, but actually a lot of the time now it's all positive. and I think people just becoming more aware. But yeah, I think that it's the high profile people are having an impact lower down, which I think is amazing. And then I guess it's just the people on the ground doing the work. It's having that representation.
Yeah, along the same lines, I think recently in the last few weeks, Josh Cavallo came out as the sort of first male or openly gay male professional footballer. He plays in the Australian League, and the amount of support you could see that he got online, similar to Tiff, you were kind of expecting there to be like hundreds of hurtful comments, but there were so many. I think he got tweets from Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Marcus Rashford and some of the best footballers in the world. Hundreds of people just sort of pouring out support for him, and that was a really sort of poignant moment for me, because I thought, wow, we have come so far in sort of the last few years. It's just really nice to see, as you say, the amount of allies that there are out there now. So yeah, I just think it's not one specific point, but just the development and where we've come over the last few years of sort of people showing support for LGBTQ plus people.
I suppose success then is about being compassionate and respectful of people's differences and choices. And I think as part of the Rainbow Laces campaign, if we can, like you say, generate the conversation and encourage people not to be scared to talk about it or feel that they can be their authentic selves when they go and play football, then I think that would be a big success. Is there anything else that you would like to add at all?
No, I think my sort of the biggest point for me is that I can only talk from my own personal point of view, but I just wouldn't want anyone to not play football because of who they are, and conversely, I wouldn't want football to stop someone being who they are. So, as I said at the start of the interview, I thought when I was younger, I thought I could never be openly gay and play football. The two things just don't work together. But I was so wrong. All my teammates and teammates from other teams I've been in and opposition players in the crowd, generally speaking, have been so supportive. And the clubs I played for on the JFA, it really is a supportive environment to be an openly gay player locally. So I would just say don't be afraid, or don't let that stop you from being who you are or getting involved in football.
Yeah, I think jumping on that as well, I would say, like for the stereotypes out there for female footballers, I know younger players might be reluctant to play because of the stereotype and assumptions that are made about them, but it's not always going to be as hard as you think it is. It's actually just an inclusive environment. So obviously there are LGBTQ plus members in our community and within the footballing community, but that shouldn't stop you coming forward and enjoying a sport that you love. It is what it is, and we're all there. It's an inclusive environment. So yeah, I would just wish that everyone would come along if that's something that they'd like to do. I don't want anyone to be put off.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Jane, Tiff. Really appreciate it. And the Rainbow Laces campaign is being supported by the Jersey Football Association, and I hope you do too.